You ever wonder if there really is a God, then why is there all this suffering and evil and all the things that God supposedly hates? Why does this exist? If God, why all the suffering? In fact, I'd probably put it like, why all the unnecessary suffering? Have you ever heard of Harlequin's disease? It's a pretty brutal disease to be born with. Um, it's not very pretty, and it makes you wonder what is the point in life just to be born with a horrible disease like Harlequin's disease, okay, where literally your skin is on, backwards, basically inverted. Basically, your nerves and everything are on the actually on the back of your or on your skin itself, which is disgusting. Cancer patients, born with cancer, born with all these diseases. Why is all that, necessary if God is real, right? Like here it is, Harlequin's disease. This is what it looks like. It's just really sad, man, when you think about that kind of stuff. This baby born into just suffering. Why is that even possible on God? Well, this is my, philosophical leanings is that we live, in a mental world. This is a mental world. Everything we know is through our consciousness. And I have ways of connecting that to a greater mind, on idealism, something like a mind, but not like a human mind, not like a mind that, you know, um, is personal, answers prayers. Because if that were the case, then all of this suffering that we see in the world just wouldn't make sense to me. And I admit that's my own sensibilities at play. It wouldn't resonate with me. Why would a God create a world like this? If you have a mind like a superhuman mind, it seems like you'd be more benevolent, unless God isn't. And it could be just the fact of the matter that this meta consciousness is cruel. But I'm also a non dualist. So I see that, you know, part of what we experience, the suffering and all of it, is going to be shared within a greater context, like a greater mind, if you will. And there is no question of why, but just a matter of this is just how nature is, on my view. Like this universe has the aspect of consciousness um, embedded in it at the fine structures of the universe, of reality. And you can know this through science, quantum non locality, because we're talking about the fundamental nature of reality. And what science tells us is that quantum field theory is the fundamental thing, most likely. And I'm saying if that's the case, then all sorts of qualia and potential of experiences actually exist as a probability distribution at that level. That's how it works. So I follow the work of Federico Fregene, who is a quantum physicist who talks a lot about this. Um, that consciousness is sort of fundamental. It takes care of the hard problem of consciousness, as a fundamental aspect. And then we have the hard problem of matter. How does matter um, come into being? Well, it's an appearance. It's an appearance in consciousness rather than something that was caused by consciousness. at least in the understanding of A causes B. It doesn't really work like that. It's more like this is just part of the nature of the universe is to experience. It's part of what it does, just like existing. So experience just seems to be a very primary thing, a very brute fact about reality. There's always an experience that's like the other side of the coin. So again, why suffering? Why all of these, horrible things like Harlequin's disease, babies born with cancer, all of that? It's just the nature of the world. It's how it is, as far as I can tell. Unless this mind is metaconscious and it does have self-awareness and it's just a cruel sort of being. It's a cruel being. But why would it do that? Why would it want to experience? Because I think there's a greater perspective. Um, I think that a lot of what we experience is our own choices that we make. Another way to look at it is the power of our thoughts. The close connection and attachments we have to our ego and to outcomes and to our meanings that we put on certain experiences and events and things. All of these also add into our suffering. For example, when you go to the gym and you work out, when you really work your muscles, you feel that burn. It's a good thing because you're working your muscles out. You feel the your whole body, your blood moving, your muscles, straining and resisting against the weight because at the end of the day it's going to help build your muscle, make you more healthy. But suppose this stuff just happened arbitrarily during the day, the same sort of pain in your muscles and things like that. You're not working out, just instantaneously this pain hits you. It'd be agony because of the meaning that you've associated to that feeling. In the gym, it feels good because you're doing work for the better. Not always. It's hard to go to the gym and put up with all that pain and stress but generally people go to the gym and they do this so that they can work themselves out, work their bodies out and feel better. So the meanings we attach to things causes our suffering too. But I guess what I'm talking about is suffering that happens outside of our control, like the babies being born just to live for a week or two, just to die a suffering death. What is the meaning behind that? The only meaning that I can think of is that it's just experience. It's just the experience that reality has for itself. The probability that such an experience would occur is obviously a non-zero, and so it had to happen. If you look at quantum field theory, you understand that all sort of things that are possible or probable to happen to some degree will, especially in an infinitesimal sort of universe. We could live in some sort of infinite universe. And if that's the case, you know, the things we call causes just go on and on and on forever. So all sorts of possible scenarios are going to actualize at some point in time, right? And that would be the explanation on idealism. Is it satisfying? Probably not. Probably not a very satisfying thing. Just like under other views like physicalism, suffering isn't really a problem. It's just the way reality is. It's impersonal. And so there's no blame involved. Blame is sort of a human construction. It's part of what helps us make sense of the world because we're storytellers. We tell these stories. And so we're always looking for meaning in the patterns and everything like that. So on some level, we're just kind of disassociated from the mystery of reality. But if your view is like Christian or Islamic, or you have this personal God concept, then you've got a major problem explaining things like Harlequin's disease and babies born with cancer and, all sorts of random acts of nature that cause suffering. Even the very idea of suffering being possible in this world puts into question the Christian God or the Abrahamic gods. Because why in the world would an all loving, all powerful, all knowing God have created anything if he knew that in order to create this world of free will agents, that there would have to entail evil and suffering, even for a minute? You couldn't be defined as all good, it seems like. You would be defined as just all bad, all good and bad, a bit of everything. And that takes the personal right out of it because, why would you, how can you really love your children if you have them born of Harlequin's disease? Something like Harlequin's disease is awful. And you allow that in so many other potential reasons to suffer to be a reality in your world that you created as a loving, all powerful, all knowing God. It doesn't make sense. And then the whole idea of free will goes out the window because, again, if you know everything that's going to happen, then where is the free will in that? Even you yourself have no free will over it, right? And I've talked to a lot of Christians and Muslims about this, and I've never heard a really coherent answer to it, in my opinion. You know, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Whereas on idealism, if the mind is impersonal, then all of those sort of things go away. There's no reason to worry about that because it's just the nature of reality to experience everything, you know. Now, a lot of near death experiencers will say that they chose to come and incarnate into this reality. They chose to come here and suffer in order for soul growth or something like that. And I used to interview a lot of near death experiencers when I used to meet with IANS, the International Association of Near Death Studies. And a lot of people will tell you that they knew before they were even born as souls somewhere in some place like heaven, if you will, that they wanted to experience what it's like to be on the earth and to have these challenges and these sufferings and experience great loss and to experience the fear of death and to experience the clinging of life on this planet. That's what they all signed up for. And so there was nothing immoral about it because it was a mutual consent to go through it. And so they say that everybody who suffers in this world consented to it. So there's no moral problem with God. God gave the souls exactly what they wanted in order to grow, to come on this planet and grow. And that's how it was explained to me with just about everyone I interviewed or listened to give talks about their near death experience. And you can go on YouTube and hear about this you know, at any time. They'll tell you the same story over and over. That's a common feature. Now, whether I believe it, I don't know. I've never died. It's never been part of my experience. Now, I have family members who have had near death experiences that have told me similar things. And I don't think they lie. I don't consider them liars. So I think that they're telling the truth. They have these experiences. I guess what it is, I don't really know, is whether these really translate into some sort of afterlife, or whether it's just, you know, the consciousness changing its, illusion during an extreme situation. But I don't know. I sort of feel like the NDEers are onto something, and it is valuable and meaningful. It helps you understand that, even if it is sort of like an illusion at death, you still, most people have these life reviews. They still have these sort of reflections. And if that's the last thing that you experience before you go into the great beyond, I want it to be as good as possible. I don't want to regret. I don't want to suffer at the end of my time if that's the case. So, in either case, either way, it just pays off to really be a good steward, man, to be a good citizen, to be a good brother, to be a good son, good daughter, good husband, good wife, good friend, because you don't want to accumulate a lot of regrets during life, and I'm at that age where I can look back and I just thank goodness that I don't have so many regrets in life, because all throughout my life I always had a feeling like, don't heap up a lot of regrets in life. You're going to regret it. So I never did. So I always tried my best to walk the straight and narrow. Always had that guilty conscience with me. You know what I mean? And it's a good thing if you can be conscientious of the end of your life. We all know we're all going to die at some point. Being aware of that, meditating on that can be really powerful stuff, because it helps you live each day with a little more meaning, a little more purpose, knowing that, it's fleeting. I don't know if there's an afterlife or anything like that ultimately. And that's not what's going to keep me on the straight and narrow. I just don't want to die with a lot of regrets, knowing that I've hurt a lot of people and that I've played this character in life that was not very meaningful, not very substantial. And so I try to find a lot of great meaning in just being a nice person to the next guy, leaving a good impression, helping people feel positive about the world. Just a smile in the morning at somebody. Hey, how you doing? Open the door for somebody. Just little acts of kindness. 'Cause you never know what people go through. People go through all kinds of suffering in this fucked up world. We've all got our little bullshit we got to deal with. And we know this. We know it in our own life. So why would we want to add to the confusion and the chaos and the pain? Just try to be as good as you can through it all, man. Try to be nice to other people and create less suffering as possible. You know, be what you want the world to be. You want the world to be less, you know, contentious. You want the world to be less full of anger and hostility and the things you hate. Then be the thing that you want the world to be for you. And it's like I said before, with my understanding of this system of perception, you can actually create that reality for yourself by projecting it and then seeing it come back and reinforcing it. When you look at the world and with the positive glasses on, and you start to really see those things, it's kind of like when you're trying to buy a car. All of a sudden the car that you're focused on buying, you see it everywhere in Publix, because your focus has now changed. So your reality is to perceive that thing that you're projecting everywhere. So if you can just choose to see things in a more positive way, in a way that aligns with what you want, then you change your life that way, and you make the world better too for others. It's very important to sort of take that stance. Acts of kindness I can get behind. What puzzles me is some folks insist they be random What's wrong with structured acts of kindness? Yeah, good morning, Paul. I feel the same way, man. Any way that you can do it, why not? Like, I know how much what it feels like to have somebody say some bullshit to me in the day or something really messed up. And it could be at the wrong time. It could be at a time when I'm going through it, man, and it just doesn't help. But even if they structured to say a nice, kind thing, it would make all the difference in the world. So whether structured or random, it really doesn't matter. What's important is that, I don't know where that comes from. It could be some sort of personal virtue you're trying to achieve when people say that. Oh, let it be random. Let it be you. Yeah, that'd be great. But you got to start somewhere, right? Like they say, um, practices can turn into habits. So you have to consciously practice riding that bike before it becomes second nature, you know. So that's where experiences for me are generated from is through doing stuff. If you want the nice experience of, kindness and positivity, start engaging that way. Be that person. Paul, a 2% infraction with a bucket at 99% is all it takes. Yeah, man. We need as much as possible. If everybody would sort of pitch in to, just say something positive during the day. I mean, I think this world would be so much better. That's just seems to be the way it is because it just that's just what it is. There's a lot of suffering in the world. We have enough um craziness, when we look at the news, social media, like we've got these wars going on. Now they're talking about ramping up um a possible war between the United States and China, a lot of fear, economically, the tariffs, they're looking at that bringing up the prices for the people. So going to Walmart's going to be crazy trying to get anything you need. There's a lot of outrage going on, man. A lot of outrage going on. And we can either feed into it or we can be the change that we need, like Paul says. Yeah, be the change is what you're saying, I think, of course. That's exactly what I'm saying. We've got to be the change. And I know it sounds corny, it's been said a lot, but I think at this time more than ever right now, we need to really be positive to each other because, we live in an age where the algorithm is everything. And everyone seems to be addicted to outrage culture on the internet. And so we see a lot of that. We see a lot of fear. We see a lot of complaining. We see a lot of division. We see a lot of canceling each other out all over the place. Everything is highly polarized. So we have to bring it back in, we really do. And like I say before at the top, it seems like if there is a God, the God seems to be, according to a lot of people, disconnected from what's going on, and it's kind of left up to us to be the knight in shining armor here. I think it was Plantinga who espoused some kind of theodicy whereby evil exists because God is omniscient and therefore knows about it. In the mind of God, the universe, evil acts manifest. Yeah, like I said, I think that God in this context, if I use the language of God, which usually I don't because it offends a lot of God believers, they see their God as more um, conceptually different. So if I was to use the God person, God concept, I would say that God is allowing evil, everything in between, between evil and good, everything in between exists so that it can have that experience. Um, my view is to sort of ground everything into the quantum field or some field of being, some ultimate field of being. And we know that with quantum mechanics, there's this probability distribution. Everything that is probable can at some point manifest. And that goes for every experience that's ever going to happen is going to manifest. And it's got to include the evil, the bad, the suffering, as well as the good stuff. It seems inevitable. I think there's also a free will component to Plantinga's philosophy, but don't quote me on it. Yeah, I think that, our free will is where we exercise our meaning because, you know, this duality gives us meaning. When we see the evil, we see the crime being committed. The hero becomes the hero when he steps in to save the day. But you have to save the day from something that's trying to take away the day. So there's this duality, there's this good and evil, there's this challenge. And it gives each and every person meaning when they can step up to the challenge. It gives everyone a meaning. And so you have free choice as long as you're not being constrained externally and you're able to decide to do it. Yeah, you have free will in that particular choice to make action. Now, ultimately, when we talk about free will, I mean, we are a derivative of everything that came before us. We came from a certain universe, certain planet, time of where we live, a culture, language. There's a context to who we are. And we didn't have any control over that. We didn't have any will over that. At least it doesn't seem that way. And we're sort of going through this world sort of ignorantly, like we don't know what the future holds. And so we make these decisions not knowing, but they are decisions, they're free choices made within that constraint. So that's kind of how I look at the free will component. But that's where agency comes in. We can react, we can choose to react to what we observe in the world. So if we see a lot of injustice and, things out of control, things that we can control, we can choose to you know, work for the good of mankind or each other or the animals or nature or whatever the case is. You can definitely choose to be a positive sort of influence. You know what I mean? And but what we see is that a lot of what people believe in, like they believe in the algorithm, the things that they're presented with on a daily basis, they're swallowing it up and they're digesting it. All this negative news media, all this divisive sort of storylines, it's all divisive. And people love it. People get, you know, dopamine hits when they get the thumbs ups and the heart reacts to hating the right groups, so they become part of these echo chambers and they really believe in that feeling. And I'm telling you, man, people really are motivated by their feelings more than arguments. Argumentation is sort of secondary. They're more emotional. Psychologism is what they call it, where people, what they believe, how they behave, it all has to do with what's feeding their feelings in a positive way, this dopamine. And they're just adapting to that feeling, that it's given them all this approval and all of this support. And they're not really reacting on the facts necessarily. You know what I mean? And so they're creating this reality, this same reality that they're looking at and that they're observing, gets processed in their unconscious. And then it just comes out and projects out onto the world and it reinforces, and it's just a reinforcing loop. And the brain is like a computer in that sense, it's just always adapting. It's always updating to new information. And if you're just feeding it this same loop of negativity, distinctions, distractions, all of this stuff of duality, it's just it's just the way that we're choosing to kind of create this reality. It's what we like. We've become accustomed to it. We like it. It's our home now. I know people that are just addicted to the outrage. They'd love to come home and turn on the news and watch the latest thing. They can hate on Donald Trump, or they hate on Elon Musk, or they hate on the Bidens and the Kamalas, and or they hate on China, they hate on Russia, Ukraine, whatever their point of contention is, whatever they've been sort of brainwashed into, they've been sucked into it. And man, they get a dopamine rush, man. They love it, man. Their brain is wired up for that stuff. And they love to have that argument and that content. And it's fun. I mean, it's fun to debate. I like to debate stuff. It's like a chess game. And if you can corner your opponent in some sort of logical argument or something like that, you can get a dopamine hit. And then when you lose an argument, you can feel, damn, I got to brush up now. And you can't wait to brush up and get better and go back to it. It's a sport. But, in society, these sort of things, like these politics over right and left, over these issues, these can be dangerous to society. It leads to people's cars and companies being burned down, and leads to people getting shot at and people getting assassinated. And, you know the deal. History is rife with all of that, right? Nothing new under the sun. It's just that now we have the technology really to wipe each other out. When you look at like what happened with Ukraine, just sent off, some pretty cheap drones and did all this damage. And now it's sort of even the playing field among countries. They can all do so much damage with these little drones and cause all this mayhem. Then we've got the nuclear factor. We've got all these new weapons that everyone's testing out. So we can do a lot of damage now with our little, you know, hateful asses. You know what I mean? It's not just, relegated to throwing bows and arrows at each other. We can now actually literally wipe out cities and towns pretty fast. Um, yeah, the Trump and Elon bromance is over now. Yeah, that's what they want us to think, huh? Until they make up next week, and then that's part of the drama. Like, it could all just be theater. I have no idea, 'cause I'm not part of it. It's fun watching it though. It is fun watching that stuff, but man, it turns out at the end of the day to kind of look all scripted and crazy. But yeah, man, a couple years ago, you know, the left was in love with Elon Musk, and they really applauded his cars and his electric cars and stuff, the Teslas. And just a few years later, now it's all the conservatives who hated the environmentalists and the electric vehicles. Now they just rally behind Trump and electric vehicles, and Trump is selling them on the White House lawn. You know, wow, how things have shifted so fast. How did that happen? Maybe because people are like sheep, man. They're all about who said what, not what was said. So being a hypocrite doesn't count. As long as the right person says it, you can be a hypocrite all you want. Now the left is burning Teslas and shit, and they hate Musk. But then this is about the change. Now Trump is kicking him out and doesn't want anything to do with Elon Musk. What now? Is the left now going to embrace him again? Is that what's going to happen? Is that how easy people are? It's just who says what. It's all about party line. It's all about that think tank, that echo chamber. Maybe Trump punched him in the White House, told him to pipe down, and hence his black eye. Yeah, I think so. I think somebody did something, and he ain't saying it. Somebody knocked the shit out his ass. But yeah, man, all this suffering, I think we're gonna have to be the force of good. We can't wait on God. We have to be the God that we wait on. We have to. What if God was one of us? You remember that song? So we kind of gotta take responsibility and accountability for our experience in life, man, and be a force for good. Like I said, I don't know if the near death experience is absolutely a reflection of what happens after we're completely dead, but it doesn't really matter to me so much as it does that I don't want to get to that point at the end of life, have that experience of life review, and have to understand. They talk about how people experience the bad things you did to others. So if you like beat the shit out of somebody during your life, you're going to know what it's like to have gotten the shit beat out of by you. You're going to be on the other side of that experience. Something to think about, because I hear that a lot when I did those interviews. If you can go on YouTube, and a lot of near death experiencers talk about that. I don't know how that could be possible, but I do know that anything is possible. Weird universe we live in. So I just don't want to take the chance at the end of my life having to relive the bad decisions I made. That's just me. You know, be a good person, man. Be good people out there. And you know, anyways, I got to get ready to head out to my job here in a bit. So I'm gonna cease and desist from continuing to blabber off. Y'all have a good one, man, and come through, like and subscribe to the channel, of course. But tomorrow at 12 p.m. Central Time, we're going to do another, live discussion. And we'll talk you know, a little bit about the political stuff that's going on. But also, we're going to talk about consciousness and some questions that people had that we can talk about and stuff like that. So if you want to come on, man, tomorrow is be open call in. um, Join us, man. Ask some questions, challenge. If you have problems with idealism or materialism or any other worldview, come on, let's steel man stuff. Let's debate about it. I'll pick a position, even if it's not really my position, just so we can sort of test each other's ideas. That's the fun thing. And one last thing here, experiential realism. What's up? I remember an NDE like that told by Bruce Grayson. A guy nearly died and relived the experience of someone he'd beaten up. And he also found out how his victim has lost his wife on that same day. Damn. See, that's hard, man. I wouldn't want to be ever having to relive extra pain. Like, I go through enough pain during my own normal life. Why would I want to take a chance to relive some pain that I had visited on someone else? I'm not trying to do it, man. Anyways, let's have a positive day today, man. We are out.